Good morning. Today we look at Luke chapter 6, verses 1 through 26. And in this part of Luke, the first part of it deals with two different Sabbaths that Jesus is kind of being watched and, setting the Pharisees off. And then starting verse 12, he goes up on the mountain to pray and he names his 12 disciples. In chapter 5, we had heard him call the four fishermen, Andrew, Peter, James, and John, and also Levi, to follow him. I'll make you fishers of men. But here in chapter 6, Luke names the 12. And then we have the Sermon on the Plain, which is similar to Matthew's Sermon on the Mount in chapter 5 of Matthew. But this Sermon on the Plain includes some woe to you, the last three verses of the Sermon on the Plain. But before I talk about that anymore, many of you probably saw a post that I thanked Katie Ovdam for sharing my first broadcast with me. It was 3 years ago yesterday. I knew that I had gotten started around Maundy Thursday 3 years ago. But I actually sat and I listened to that first broadcast. And I thought I had gone through and deleted all those old ones, and I have it set now to automatically delete after 30 days. And after listening last night, I kind of wondered if maybe I should just leave them on. And I just thought, well, my Facebook page just gets, not that I deal with it a lot, but it just gets long and cumbersome. But I wanted to just, again, to say thank you to all of you who tune in on somewhat of a regular basis, some every day, and it's just seems amazing to me that it's been 3 years that I've done this every day. And I remember one time when we were going to be gone, I said, well, maybe I should skip a couple days, and Cheryl said, but why? And so we continue. And this Sunday is Palm Sunday. We'll be live from Mabel at 9 o'clock, and then on Monday, Thursday, we're planning to meet at Mabel, and Good Friday, I will do something most likely from home, and then we'll have Easter coming up so quickly. Anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about Matthew 6, and it starts with one Sabbath while Jesus was going through the grain fields. His disciples plucked some heads of grain, rubbed them in their hands, and ate them. And, that is such a thing for, most of us out here in this neck of the woods have got something to do with farming or know a little bit about farming. And I remember many times going out in the wheat fields and the durum fields, barley fields, you didn't really do that, or oats, but the wheat and the durum, you'd go out and you'd grab a couple heads and you'd shell them out like that. You'd just rub them in between your hands and get the kernels to come out of the chaff, and you'd hold your hands and blow the chaff away, and you would just toss that wheat into your mouth and see how hard it was. It was a way of checking the moisture content. But for Jesus' disciples, it was a way of getting some nourishment on the Sabbath. And we don't just eat plain wheat. We don't eat just ground wheat. Like a grape nut cereal is pretty much that. And we have breakfast cereals that are made out of wheat, that's made into flakes that way. But not too many people just eat whole wheat, just right out of the field anymore. But it was work. It was work to shell that out for those disciples. And the Pharisees got upset because Jesus and his disciples were working. And, it's laughable to me, that, it was the nitpicky stuff that these Pharisees were doing. And they were watching Jesus closely. And, here we're only in chapter 6 of Luke. And we know what happened all the way along. As soon as Jesus returned from the wilderness of his temptations and the first miracle that happened, the Pharisees heard about it, and boom, we got to watch this guy. And they did. They watched him, with Everything they did, they looked it over with a fine-toothed comb, we would say, or with a microscope. They watched him closely. And they chastised him and his disciples, but mostly Jesus, because he was the leader. And how many times do we see the leader get the criticism, get the blame, and credit, I mean, that way too, but you know, we look to the leader, and you remember a game we played as kids, you'll follow the leader. Or Simon Says, you know, you would do what you were told, and if you got caught, you know, whoop, you were in trouble. But the leader has influence, and others emulate the leader. They want to be like him. And as we're growing up, you know, we pick our heroes or our models of someone that we want to be like when we grow up. And I remember watching one man in particular as I grew up, and thinking, you know, that, you know, he's the kind of man I want to be, you know, and some ways I hope I am, but other ways I know I'm not. But yet, you know, we follow the leaders. And the Pharisees were the leaders of the Jewish people, and Jesus was threatening to them because of his teaching, because of the authority that he had with his teaching, because of his amazing abilities to perform miracles, and of his interpretation of laws. Like, you know, here the Pharisees, to thresh out a sample of wheat was working on a Sunday. You know, they couldn't travel more than a real short distance. You know, there were so many rules and regulations, and the Pharisees kept meticulous track of them. And so Jesus was in trouble that way. But his, you know, the end of his response that day is, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. And I think it was in Matthew, he said that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. The Sabbath day is a day that, you know, it's a reminder. The Sabbath is a reminder that we are to take a day a week for ourselves, rather than, you know, we're not supposed to work 7 days a week and to work, you know, continually that way. But God knows, and that our bodies need rest and recuperation time. And that was the Sabbath. So the Sabbath was made for man. And then verse 6, on another Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and taught. And there was a man there with a withered hand. And again, you know, they are watching him. And Jesus, it said, you know, Luke's gospel, you know, it says that he knew what they were thinking. In this book, in a different one, it said he perceived what they were thinking. So Jesus knew what they were thinking. That is he gonna heal that man today? Is he gonna do something? We gotta watch him, you know. And sure enough, you know, he calls the man to him, come and stand here. And then it says Jesus got up and stood there and asked the religious leaders, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save a life or to destroy? And it says, after looking around at all of them, you know, he looked at all of them, and evidently didn't get a response. And he says to this man, stretch out your hand. And his hand that had formerly been withered, the man stretched it out, and it was completely healed and just as good as his other hand, and he could do work with it. His hand was restored, and it says, verse 11, they were filled with fury and discussed with one another what they might do to Jesus. So they're nitpicking him about threshing grain, working on the Sabbath. And then they're filled with fury because he has the audacity, the courage, the blatant ignoring of the law to work again on the Sabbath and to heal this man, to do good. Jesus says, is it better to do good on the Sabbath? Or the evil, the bad, would be to ignore, you know. But Jesus says, do good. The next few verses, you know, he names the 12 disciples. Verse 17, it says he came down with them and stood on this level place. And verse 19, all in the crowd were trying to touch him, for power came out from him and healed all of them. So again, the crowd is clamoring around Jesus, knowing to touch him, to be touched by him, would heal their illness, their sickness, their deformity, their whatever it was. You know, if they had a cold, if they had leprosy, I mean, you know, whatever. They knew that Jesus had this healing power. And then again, verse 20, it says, he looked up at his disciples and said, blessed are you who are poor, and the Beatitudes. I talked about those in Matthew, and you can look at those here too. But as I said at the beginning today, there are the woes. Woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. Woe to you who are full now, for you will be hungry. Woe to you who are laughing now, for you will mourn. Woe to you when all speak well of you, for that's what their ancestors did to the prophets. So Jesus is reminding us, don't get so full of yourself. Don't say, I did it all by myself. I did, you know, but, you know, and to remember that, you know, just because we have what we have, don't be braggarts, don't be full of ourselves, don't look down our noses at others because of what we have, because we can easily be brought down. So it's warnings for us, reminders that, you know, we are to treat others with respect, with dignity, to do what we can to help them, to be followers of God. It says that, you know, in that where he chose and named his 12 disciples, he called all of his disciples together and named these 12 as apostles. So we are all disciples of Jesus. And also we are apostles, sent out to serve and to welcome and to teach. So may God lead and guide you this day, as he always does.